Hi, and welcome to Kay Let's Talk, the podcast where we break down storytelling across books, television, and film with a special love for book-to-screen adaptation. Here, we talk about craft, character arcs, structure, dialogue, visual language, and the creative choices that shape how a story lands. If you like thoughtful conversational deep dives into the stories you can't stop thinking about, you're in the right place. Let's talk. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we're going to be talking about Heated Rivalry episode 4, titled Rose. And if there is a midpoint in Shane and Ilya's story, this is it. This episode contains an inciting incident that finally forces both of them to admit how they feel, not just physically, but emotionally, and it really is the turning point for their story. This is also the episode that gave us the Tuna Melt scene, which I am obligated to mention because it made me feel physically ill in the way only this story can. And then, just to make sure we didn't emotionally recover, we end with the club scene in a sequence that was so overwhelming that I genuinely had to take a lap and scream into a pillow. So today, we're going to break down Rose, all the little inciting incidents that take place within it, go scene by scene, and hopefully we're all in a better state of mind to break this down together. So without further ado, here is episode 4. The opening montage in episode 4 of Heated Rivalry is so good that I sometimes forget that there's an entire section that comes before it. We open with a game between Shane and Ilya. Boston is winning with 3 minutes left in the third, and Ilya scores on the TV. I love that this show uses the aspect ratio to reflect the size of a broadcast, and then we go back to wide once we're inserted back into the actual show. Ilya and Shane are at the face-off dot against one another, and Ilya asks, "Having a good night," which made me laugh because this is the exact dialogue straight out of the prologue of Heated Rivalry, which makes it October of 2016. The show moves it around here though, and this was his second goal of the game. So he pokes fun at Shane by saying there's still time for him to get a hat trick, which is 3 goals in one game for those who don't know. And in the book, the referee actually told him to shut up as a last warning, and then Ilya winked to get under Shane's skin, and that's how he won the face-off. Ilya scores, and Shane is clearly upset, as he would be because they lose 4-1, and then the show fades to summer 2014, where we begin the second unbelievable montage of this series, and to one of my favorite songs that was used in the show, My Moon, My Man by Feist. In the prologue, we actually follow Shane into the locker room for a post-game press conference where we find out that Ilya continued to egg him on via the press, saying he wished Shane had been playing tonight, and that feeds into their encounter later on at the house where Ilya goes to meet Shane. The whole time, Shane's telling himself that he's going to end things between them soon because he's disgusted by his own weakness when it comes to Ilya. In the show, the montage starts with Ilya running in Moscow, where we've seen him before, and Shane and Ilya's texts start to come up on the screen again. Them wishing each other a good summer is going to be a narrative callback, and it also uses the text messages to demonstrate how time is passing and how their dynamic is evolving. Shane is working out alone, spending a lot more time with Hayden, and Ilya continues to be alone when he's working out too. The lyrics of this song work super well with this montage, which is definitely intentional by Jacob. The line, "Heart on my sleeve, not where it should be, the song's out of key again," is a great way to kick off the montage because we see that over time, the song being out of key is them being apart. Ilia and Svetlana are partying together, and it shows that Ilia handles his off seasons with a very healthy balance of work and play, while we see Shane continuing to be very strict within his life, reading, going to bed early, and we get to see him in his glasses for the first time, which again gets paid off later on in episode 5. The line, shed some light on me please," is another awesome lyric that relates back to the episode we just watched with Scott and Kip, and the concept of them deserving sunshine, coming out into the light like Shane and Ilya would like to. Then we start to see that Shane is doing a lot more brand deals and commercials, and none of them are aligned with him as a person per se. We know Shane likes ginger ale, and yet here he is promoting an orange drink that we never see him drink on screen. And Una is continuing to try and make him a brand and take advantage of his visibility. Una managing Shane's life in this way and putting him into all of these advertising opportunities is just another example of how Shane has very little control over his own personal life. And I do think this is important context for when we get the scene between Una and Shane in the finale episode as well. I also loved that Jacob Tierney took full advantage of this video wall and included it so many times in this montage. He really got his money's worth with this video wall. I love these shots where we see Ilia and Shane looking at their schedules to see when they play against each other next. They're both in the Atlantic Division, so that would mean they play each other 4 times in the regular season. We can see that this is the 2014-15 schedule, and we're in October. We're looking over Ilia's shoulder to see that month. They play Montreal on Saturday, October 11th in Boston. Ilia tells Shane, "See you soon," just as the lyrics say, "My moon and me, not as good as we've been," which is a really great lyric to say that they've been apart and this will be the first time this season they meet each other. The line, "It's the dirtiest clean I know," is also the perfect lyric here too, because it implies that the connection they have is lying to itself. It's the most honest thing they know, but it's wrong and not allowed. We see Shane on the ice against Boston, skating down the ice, getting hit in the corner by Ilia, and then spliced to the shot of them having sex in Ilya's apartment where Ilia is showing his dominance. That was game 1. This is game 2 because Shane's in a home jersey, white, and Ilya's in the team's away jerseys, black. This Duncan shout out is hilarious because they actually sponsor the Bruins, so I thought that was pretty funny. We see them in Shane's shower, then fast forward through the remainder of that season, and Shane and the Metros have won the cup, which is Shane's first cup. Ilia is watching on the TV in his living room, alone in the dark, and just like Shane had smiled when he won, Ilia is much more open and smiles pretty big and is happy for Shane to win. This is the first time in 16 years that the Metros have won, so for Montreal, Shane would be a hero. Since they drafted him, he's turned their team around, and we see in the montage that he started a dynasty with this team again. For those who have read the second book, Shane starting this dynasty will be important in season 2, just like it was in book 2. And we move into the following season, which is summer 2015, with the same sequence repeating. So Ilia running in Moscow, this time with a pair of new headphones. And this time he is the one who texts Shane first and wishes him a boring summer. Shane texts him back to enjoy friendly Russia, which is interesting given how Shane speaks about Russia to Ilia in the show. And Ilia and Shane are both working out hard in the gym, but Ilia is still going out with Svetlana, meeting women in clubs, drinking, and Shane is staying in his lane, reading hockey books, except now we see him checking his phone for messages, rereading their messages, longing for Ilia to message him. This is the first time we see that they are starting to distract one another in their personal lives. It hasn't yet bled into their professional lives. And Ilia is on his phone now more too. Even when he's out with Svetlana having fun, she's noticing that he's not mentally there when they're out. He's sucked into his phone. We see Shane partaking in an underwear commercial, and Jacob made his money back with this video wall, like I said, and he's the one acting as the commercial director as well. And then the cycle repeats again, so now Shane is the one looking at the team's schedule, mirroring the shot of Ilia looking at Boston's in his locker room last season. The lyrics here say, "There's nowhere to go but up," and the next lyric is "Heart on my sleeve." So Shane texts Ilia first and invites him to his house for their hookup and makes a joke about the dark alley and the back door that we saw Ilia enter through in episode 2, which is a way for Shane to show Ilia he listens to what he says, because that was a throwaway line from 2013. I love these clips because it's a huge payoff for the end of the episode when Shane and Rose are in his house later on, because Shane and Ilia can't separate themselves, and Shane's leading Ilia, which is in direct contrast to him and Rose. We skip to the end of the 2015 season and Shane has won his second cup. Ilia's watching with friends this time and jokes that it should have been him, but we already know his private thoughts and that he's happy for Shane. I absolutely love this slow-mo shot inside the locker room post-cup victory, because this is exactly what NHL locker rooms look like, with the plastic everywhere to protect the lockers. Shane has just won the pinnacle of his sport, and he's looking at his phone, answering Ilia, and it makes this victory feel shared and also playful between them. The commentators note that this hasn't happened since Chicago in the 90s. Remember Svetlana saying Chicago's not what they used to be? Well, this confirms that. This is also when they first start calling it a potential dynasty, which will be important in season 2. We jump to summer 2016. The shot of Ilia now starts when he's already around the building, and he's upgraded to wireless headphones. So I think that's such a clever way to show the case how much time has passed. And this time Shane texts first, making a joke that Ilia shouldn't train too hard because he's going to win again next year. Ilia stops running, and then we see Shane training with Hayden, and Hayden catches him getting distracted by his phone as well. This is when their distraction starts bleeding into their professional life, because we see Ilia running on the treadmill, running like Shane at the same time, but he's got his phone with him now. To me, this is when the two of them really start to be starved for contact. They start constantly looking at their phones, waiting for a message, looking up news about the other. This is reinforced by the shot of Shane having his phone on the rowing machine just in case, and he keeps looking down at it. You can see him in these shots when he's rowing, looking down at the phone. In Moscow, we can see Ilya's father is continuing to deteriorate, and he's at home taking care of him, yelling at Alexei on the phone while giving his father his meds, which is the total opposite of Shane's summers, where he's in his favorite place with his father, who he has a close relationship with. This is also the first time we get to see the cottage, and Shane's talking to his dad about something that his mom said about someone being the worst player who had no hand-eye coordination. The next time we see Ilya in the club, he's now totally consumed by his phone, scrolling instead of being present, and Svetlana is catching on and would no doubt have seen him reading through messages with Jane by now, because she calls him out for it later in this episode. Now we can actually place how she would know that they've been talking, and when the girl approaches him, he blows her off, which we know is not typical of Ilya or how he historically spends his summers. There's also no drink in front of him at the bar. And then Shane, who's normally alone in his room reading, is now spending more time with Hayden, being social, but he is stuck looking at his phone, rereading messages from Ilia and awaiting a new one. And he's starting to do it now at work events. So his mind is elsewhere and it's starting to distract him. We repeat the cycle with Ilia in Boston, looking at the schedule. So another season has begun and Boston is playing at Montreal. In the books, part 3 starts with Ilia playing against Philadelphia. And if you pause, you can actually see that game on the calendar. Shane is looking at the calendar at the same time again in his locker room, which again kind of implies that they're in sync. And you can see him try to mask as he turns to face his teammates. It moves the timeline up to October 2016. These 3 scenes in episode 4 of Heated Rivalry do a really great job of showcasing that Shane and Ilya are not as good at hiding their relationship as they think. In this scene, Hayden is now one of the only other people to tell Shane that he is a bad liar, and this scene is pulled directly out of the books. Unfortunately, though, they didn't put a hat on Shane, so that's a missed opportunity. We also get a lot of really important internal dialogue from Shane in this scene of the books. He mainly points out that he's the minority now among his teammates because most of the guys were married before they were 25. Hayden met Jackie when they were 20, they got married at 21, and Shane recalls that the same night they met, he had an embarrassing sexual encounter with a woman named Ophelia, he can't remember. The show uses this scene as an opportunity to mention that Shane had a girlfriend named Jessica. In the books, he actually thinks of her during the draft in episode 1 because he breaks up with her right around then after meeting Ilia, and he was trying to deny the fact that he was attracted to Ilia and men. Both in the show and in the books, we can see that Shane has become very close to Hayden and his family. He also really likes kids. When Hayden prompts Shane about dating, it's because Hayden is curious why he's not in this phase of life alongside him. In the books, there's a line about, "Hayden, do you find me attractive?" And Shane thinks to himself that there are worse case scenarios than having Hayden pike all over him, but he was never going to tell him that. Besides, he never had anything but platonic feelings for him. But then he notes all of his attractive features. Both in the book and the show, Hayden makes it clear that he would love for Shane to have a partner so that they could do things together as couples and hang out in that way. In the book, when Hayden hands Shane Arthur, Shane has a lot more time to think, and he thinks about what would happen if he told Hayden that he liked men. He doesn't think Hayden would shun him or anything. At worst, it would just be awkward, but he still didn't want to risk finding out. And Shane still thinks in his head that he would someday meet a girl that he could settle down with, and his occasional attraction to men would not be an issue. Because by this point, Shane has really created a core belief that what he does with Ilia does not mean anything about who he is, which we all know is not true, but he hasn't realized that yet. In the book, Shane also thinks about a hypothetical of what Hayden would think if he found out that he had been hooking up with Ilya Rozanov since they were rookies. And when he's imagining that, he ends up snorting out loud, and that's the moment when the 2 young girls come over to him and ask if they can take pictures with him. In the book passage, I think it's actually important that Shane has a lot of negative thoughts about having to take pictures with fans, because you have to imagine he is now the face of the Montreal Metros, and people in Montreal take their hockey very seriously. For him to go anywhere, there's a risk of being seen and having people want to talk to you and take photos. Hayden is jokingly jealous about it, and Shane says to him, "I'll take a selfie with you if you want." And Hayden says a line, "I should have never become friends with you," and follows it up with, "My ego can't take it. It's like being friends with the damn sun." There is a passage in the book at some point when Shane says that he used to always look forward to listening to his favorite players give interviews or talk, so he very much tries to do the right thing by the fans. And that's just another example of, in hockey culture, Shane is fitting in and conforming to the expectations. Shane made me laugh here too because he takes Jackie's joke in jest to text her when Hayden swears 5 times, and he takes it so literally that he's been actively keeping track. I do think he would send that text message because he's so literal. When we jump to the video of Ilia watching Shane on TV, this scene is different in the show than the books. In the show, he's in a hotel room in Washington watching ESPN blindly, and then he hears the name Shane Hollander and he perks up and watches it alone. Here, he watches it in front of Svetlana, which gives her more insight into the potential crush that he has on Shane, and she brings this up in the scene that follows. And in the book, him being alone, he doesn't have a witness. He's not letting anybody in on the secret. Ilia uses the term boring in reference to Shane in front of Svetlana, and we as the viewer already know that that's actually a term of endearment for him now. And this whole scene is also a narrative payoff for the finale when we get to the cottage and Shane figures out that Ilia had watched this special already. In the book, Ilia seeing the inside of this house means a lot more because he's actually never been inside Shane's home. He always goes to a building that Shane owns and not his actual home in Montreal. And Ilia's internal thoughts in this scene are actually a very big window into how he feels. He recognizes that Shane and Ilia are opposites in every way imaginable, but it's getting harder for him to deny the fact that he wants more from him. When Svetlana and Ilia are in the car, this is an added scene that helps to reinforce the fact that she's onto him. She knows he talks to Jane. She knows he looks at Shane videos when he's alone. It's providing a lot of context clues for her conversation with him in episode 5. Ilya's lost in his phone again when she asks him if he's seeing anyone, and I love that they double down on her not only being around Ilia for sex, she's his friend first. She would not be jealous if he found someone and was happy. She would be happy for him. And instead, she's trying to see if Ilia will let him in on his private life. For her to mention Jane is tactical because she wants to see his reaction, and he whips his head so hard, and she would have picked up on that, and does, because this is the first time someone in the show has exposed the fact that Shane and Ilia have not been as secretive as they think they are. Ilia calls Shane a bad liar, and this is the first time that I think his resolve really breaks in front of someone who is so close to the truth. Marlo saw him blushing, but he doesn't know Ilia well enough or care enough to dig into who Jane is, but Svetlana would. Ilia also can't look her in the eye when he says it's not serious, then doubles down by saying, or anything, which again is a giveaway. To reinforce that, Svetlana says Sasha says hi, and Ilia is almost offended by that, but you can kind of infer that he knows she's prying. This is mirrored perfectly with the short moment between Shane and Hayden that follows this scene. So these 3 scenes bookend each other really perfectly because Hayden's in a similar position with Shane as Svetlana is to Ilia. He's caught on to the fact that Shane meets up with a girl named Lily whenever they're in Boston, and Shane freaks out that anyone could possibly be close enough to the truth because he feels like he and Ilia have done a great job hiding and keeping this thing a secret. In the book, Shane's actually only started going to Ilia's home and not a hotel as of last season. The show has this be the first time that he's ever been to Ilia's home. In the books, he has described this feeling of shame and fear and anticipation about going to Ilia's. He also plans on talking to Ilia tonight and ending things, then going back to the hotel, and says he's lost count of how many times he's broken that promise to himself over the years. I love the continuity of Shane hooking his thumbs into his pants when he's nervous. He's also bouncing on his heels, and he has a total glass face when Hayden implies he plays better after because, again, it's too close to the truth. These scenes show that both Shane and Ilia are not as good at hiding this as they think they are, and as they continue to get closer, the people in their orbit are becoming more observant. And as we saw in the montage at the beginning of the episode, they are starting to affect each other in professional settings as well as their personal lives. So again, it's getting harder and harder for them to both hide their feelings, which sets up a really pivotal moment with the Tuna Melt scene. All of this going into that is so important to know and have contextualized. The Tuna Melt scene is one of the most iconic scenes in all of Heated Rivalry, and there's a lot of differences between the book and show representation of this scene. When Shane knocks on the material outside of the house, it kills me because that's something I would totally do. We see Ilia approaching the front door, fixing his hair before letting Shane inside, and Shane asks if he should take off his shoes, which is a great through line because we saw Shane take off his shoes before lunging at Ilia in the hotel in episode 1. He mentions it again here, and then we see Ilia automatically take off his shoes at the cottage. I also love that the show flipped the beginning of the scene so that Shane is walking in first and Ilia is following him, because in the book, Ilia just walks through the door and heads upstairs to the bedroom, making Shane follow him, which upsets him. It's also another opportunity for them to pay off the real estate joke that Ilia has been making for years with Shane, and to show that Shane is nervous because he's trying to distract himself with the house to avoid bringing up the talk that he needs to have with him. In the books, we know that he planned on talking to Ilia Knight to end things. The two of them have sex, and this scene is really not about sex. It's about control, intimacy, and two men who are pretending they don't want the same thing. Ilya's behavior in this entire scene breaks their established pattern almost immediately. In the book, he straight up asks Shane to face him while they sleep together, and then maintains eye contact and very much scares Shane by asking him to stay. That's because Ilia is very much trying to change their emotional distance. And even though Ilia doesn't straight up say, "This means something to me," he behaves like it does. He almost treats this day like fantasy building, like he wants to build a temporary safe version of what it could be like if they were together. And he wants to know what it feels like to have Shane in his home as a person and potential partner. This scene here where they're napping with one another is such a great addition, and I absolutely loved it because it makes total sense when we see the finale episode and they take a nap and Ilya's actually able to fall asleep. Here, it's almost like he's afraid to fall asleep. He can't believe that he actually has Shane here. The problem with all of this is that Shane filters things through a very different lens than Ilia. So when Ilia starts to dress him in his clothes and make him food, it starts to wear at Shane's resolve. In this scene in particular, you can notice how Shane reacts to Ilia's softness and kindness. He gets anxious when Ilia is behaving in a way that's unfamiliar to him. It's clear that Ilia wants to take care of Shane in this way, and he went out of his way to buy this food, prepare it, put it in the fridge, get ginger ale for him, put it in his fridge early enough in the day that it would be cold for him by the time he got here, knew they had an afternoon game, asked him to stay. Because at this point, Ilia knows what he wants, and what he wants is Shane, but he's actively testing the boundary of what they are to each other. Essentially, Ilia is trying to see, how far can I go before you run away? And every time Shane doesn't immediately retreat, both physically and emotionally, Ilia pushes a little further. So again, having him sit on his couch, share silence that they've never done before, watch TV. They've never done that before. None of those things are accidental. He's almost trying to ease Shane into this environment to make him see that it's nice when they're together, that they're capable of having an environment like this where they can enjoy each other's company for what it is. Throughout this entire scene, Shane is filtering everything through denial because he can't conceptualize him desiring Ilia as part of who he is. So every time an emotional signal gets sent his way by Ilia, it reroutes itself into panic. He treats sleeping with Ilia as something he does and not something he is, because again, he has very deep internalized homophobia. That framework that he operates within falls apart when Ilia looks at him while they sleep together, holds him afterwards, makes him a Tuna Melt, invites him into his life by talking to him in this way on the couch. Anytime Ilia shows any sort of softness or affection towards him, it feels dangerous to him. He doesn't think this feels nice. He thinks this is wrong because it feels nice. The only time that Ilia historically has been able to get any sort of emotion out of Shane is when he's angry or jabbing at him. When Ilia is talking about Svetlana and other women, Shane's forced to sit inside of truths he hasn't reconciled yet, which is that he probably is jealous of Ilia, and he doesn't want to imply that he has any sort of emotional investment. It would also imply that he is gay. He also doesn't feel like he has the right to object because they're not in a relationship, and he himself has said over and over that this is nothing. And he also doesn't know how to articulate his feelings without outing himself. Basically saying that bothers me would require him to tell Ilia why it bothers him, and he doesn't know. So instead, he plays along, even though inside he doesn't want Ilia sleeping with other women because he wants to be with Ilia. His brain labels it as annoyance. And Ilia in this scene is not bragging or trying to make Shane jealous for fun. I think he's just fishing. When he says it's nice to have regular women like that around, I think it's more of him saying this is for convenience, not because I actually like them. But he's also trying to open the door for Shane to say, does this bother you? Do you care? Do I matter to you? And Ilia doesn't know how to ask that directly, because if he did ask him directly, he knows Shane would either lie to him or run away. He spends that whole conversation glancing at Shane with his side eyes because he desperately wants to know if Shane's feeling anything. He just wants him to show him something. But when he stays neutral, Ilya's worried that that means maybe he doesn't care. This is when he escalates things and says, I like girls, because bringing up Svetlana didn't get him anywhere. And that line is very simple because Ilya's not confused. He does like girls, and he does also like Shane. He's not asking for permission to feel that way, he's just stating a fact. Him being attracted to Shane isn't a crisis of identity because he already knows that he is bisexual. Him saying, I never hear about you with girls is an actual genuine question. He's asking for Shane to share something about himself. He's actually giving Shane an environment for him to say, I like women too, or I don't like women. Because for Ilia, liking men doesn't mean you also don't like women. When Ilia takes this phone call and leaves the room, Shane kind of runs through the gambit of all of his interactions with women, and after basically telling himself that he doesn't like being with them, he still comes to the conclusion that there must be a girl out there somewhere who didn't make him feel the way he does when he's with Ilia. Hudson's facial expressions in these moments when he's alone, I think perfectly capture that, and by the time Ilia returns to the couch, he is reeling. And Ilia is now really exposed because he just got off the phone with his father. You can see that in how tense he is. He's constantly touching his hair and his neck. So when Shane gives him something, which is that he understands a word in Russian, it's the first time all day that Shane has opened up to Ilia, and it overwhelms him. His face is absolutely perfect here. You can tell that he's just stunned that he was able to get something out of Shane and that it came from that of all things. His reaction is immediate and physical. He doesn't think about it too much. He just pulls Shane closer to him, and that's when he starts cuddling with him. This isn't meant to be a form of, initiation. But again, that breaks the pattern for Shane because he's not being teased or challenged. He's just being held. This is the kind of intimacy that Shane has never allowed himself to want. In the book, it's actually Ilia that initiates the sex again, but I like that the show changed it to Shane, because in the book, Shane can kind of stay in his denial if Ilya's the one that's driving the intimacy forward. In the show now, Shane is the one that's redirecting their tender moment to sex again, because that's familiar to him. When Ilia says Shane's name, that's when everything implodes, because again, names are personal. And Shane's so stunned, he says Ilia back and then immediately panics. This moment here when Ilia kind of chases Shane's kiss is really so heartbreaking for me, because Ilia is laying himself bare here. And both of them acted this so well, because in real time you can see them both short-circuiting just in different ways. Ilia was so happy, and then he's confused, and then he's getting defensive to protect himself. And even though it feels like rejection to Ilia, this isn't rejection to him, it's self-preservation, because he doesn't want to admit that this is real, and to him, he can't want to be with Ilia and be safe. His nervous system doesn't know how to deal with that, so he chooses to run away. When Shane leaves, Ilia almost kind of like dares him to stay with his eyes, and he's so heartbroken, and when he's met with no, he tries to armor himself again. He calls him Hollander. He tries to go back to what they were before. It's out of desperation, but also trying to protect himself because he just tried to be vulnerable and Shane couldn't meet him there. So he's trying to close the door to his emotions before Shane can hurt him even more. And the scene ends in heartbreak for both. Within the Tuna Melt scene is this very important phone call that we are privy to as viewers in the show between Ilia and his father. In the book, Shane knows that Ilia leaves to go talk on the phone, but he has no idea what is said, so the show is able to fill that in contextually. And I think it's important to think about this scene because it directly impacts how he returns to Shane on the couch and how he reacts afterwards. Because watching a TV show puts us, the viewer, in a sort of unbiased third-party role, we know more about Ilia's family life than Shane does. We already know that his father was abusive. We know that his relationship with Alexei is terrible. So knowing that he answers the phone and his father's on the other line has a lot of weight for us, but it doesn't have any for Shane. In the world that they're in, nobody actually knows that Ilia is carrying the weight of managing a father with dementia. So for us, this is what his private life actually looks like. The fact that this conversation is in Russian is important because it sort of armors Ilia from Shane getting too close to his personal life. But just like with any language, Shane would be able to pick up on the fact that this isn't a good conversation. The way that his tone is coming across would clue him in that this isn't a positive interaction, especially when he leaves Alexei that voicemail and it's very clearly anger. The framing of this entire scene is really amazing because we're very close to the upper part of Ilia's body. It cuts him in half. He's not in the middle, so it's very much off balanced. We can tell from this phone call that his father is advancing pretty rapidly and that his memory is getting much worse. I love this shot here where he's basically split in half by the wall, hiding behind it, but visually it's a really great metaphor. We also know now that Alexei is employed by Ilia to take care of his father. If you've read the books, then you know that Ilia's necklace belonged to his mother, and I think that it's really important that Ilia touches it in this moment here. Anything that would make him feel safe in that moment, he'd be clinging to, and touching it is like a grounding technique. He also physically shakes his anger off in that moment too, something we see him do in episode 5 as well. When Ilia returns to the living room, he's already decided Shane's not going to get that version of him, and I don't think it's because he doesn't trust him to see it, but more so he doesn't want to burden him with it. And Shane doesn't understand Russian, but he understands one word, father, and that destabilizes Ilia because for a split second, I think he's terrified that Shane might know more than he intended, but then it flips and it becomes almost like hopeful because if Shane understands even a little Russian, it's an attempt to understand Ilia, which is why his reaction is very physical. He just grabs him to hold him. He doesn't overthink it. He's self-soothing through this connection with Shane when he's kind of falling into that domestic role again, petting his hair, pulling him closer to him. Shane to him is something safe, and he is trying to rid himself of something that's very destabilizing, which is his family. Shane doesn't have that context, so it seems like Ilia left and now he wants closeness again. So it really adds depth to what happens next when he says his name. This scene in episode 4 serves multiple narrative functions at one time and is brilliantly executed for that reason. The first is that this is the first time we see Shane in the aftermath of the Tuna Melt scene. In the books, he runs away from Ilia, regrets it instantly, and then freaks out alone in his hotel room shower. Here we actually get to see him freaking out and how he's dealing with it in the aftermath, which is being very short and closed off to his parents, the people that he's normally very open with, which is a big deal because we have not seen him get short with them so far in the series. This shot here of Shane sitting with an empty chair next to him is going to be a very important visual callback for the finale episode, which is reinforced by the waiter coming up and asking if they're waiting for anybody else. That seat will be filled with Ilia by the end of this series and the end of episode 6. Normally, when we've seen Shane with his parents at this exact restaurant, he is centered between the two of them. There isn't an extra chair there. So here we're getting told indirectly ahead of time that pretty soon that seat will be taken. This scene also brings up Shane being Asian Canadian and what that looks like in his career. We've seen him shoot commercials with multiple brands at this point, so he's putting words to things that he's been feeling for a long time now. Shane telling them that he does not want to attend Wimbledon. Yuna tries to kind of bait him by saying that he might be sitting next to a Swedish princess, which could be fun. This is also a way to show that they've probably picked up on the fact that Shane doesn't does not have much interest whenever they mention women, and that contextualizes them saying to him in the finale that they suspected he might have been gay. The other key dialogue component here is Una telling Shane that she doesn't want him to lie, that's not who he is, and his eyes are brilliant in this because you can see right away that hits him right in the solar plexus. So when Shane tells Una he tried, he did his best in the finale, it lands harder because of that moment. And I also love the visual cue that we have of David and Una sitting on the same side of the table because we see it again in the finale episode. And they do much of the same things. They look at him with a lot of concern. David never takes his eyes off of Shane in the cottage episode. This scene is what gives a lot of the finale episode at the cottage kitchen table so much weight. In the book, when JJ invites Shane out to the bar, it's November 2016. In the book, Shane knows that JJ is very insistent, and so if he were to say no to going out with him, he'd just get more phone calls for the rest of the night telling him what he was missing out on. Interestingly, Shane's face only lights up and looks like he's interested when JJ mentions the X-Squad cast being there. That's probably because he's interested in those movies more so than he's interested in the cast themselves. He's also in the book avoiding sitting at home alone watching the Boston hockey game on TV and knows he could use a distraction, so he agrees to go out. It's a Tuesday night in the book, so this is very abnormal for him, but again, he's trying to run away from his feelings and not have to confront them. I love that sweeping shot where we follow JJ's eyes and loop around the bar. And then this is very important because I read this scene as one of the very few and first times we see Shane almost attempting to flirt with a guy. This bartender is obviously very attractive, and in the book, Shane reflects that he finds him attractive. He mentions Rose Landry, and Shane goes through the motions of being excited to see her, but you can tell that he's also enjoying talking to this man too. I think Hudson does a great job here showing that Shane is a little nervous and anxious talking to this guy, which is in direct contrast to how he's very relaxed when he's talking to Rose. That's because Rose is not a threat to him. I also really enjoy this shot here because I think it puts a great visual example of anxiety onto Shane. He's overwhelmed in this environment. He's there, but he doesn't want to be there, and he needs to be alone for a moment to decompress and get his head screwed on straight. In the books, he finds an empty table in the corner, and here we see him sitting down in a booth without looking at who else is occupying that booth, and when he turns, it's Rose Landry. And again, this is another example of how Shane can be very personable and easy to talk to when he's engaging with someone who's not a romantic threat to him. I say threat because Shane at this point still has not come to terms with his own sexuality, so anything that's not a female potential love interest seems like a threat to him because it makes him confront the fact that he's interested in men. The two of them fall into a very easy conversation, which is also how it's described in the books. They talk about their childhoods. Shane is someone who Rose inadvertently slips up the plot to her movie, so it's clear that she also is very comfortable talking to him too. Shane covering his mouth here is interesting because we just saw him eating with Ilia and he wasn't as proper. So again, just shows the difference between how he behaves with Ilia versus other people. This is the second time in the episode where Shane's race gets brought up as well. They talk about what it would be like for him being the only Asian kid growing up playing hockey. And he makes a really valid comment here about how his Western last name impacted how other kids treated him. I think that's a really important piece of information for them to include in the show because that is the reality. It's also the first time in the show where Shane actually admits to us as the viewer and probably to himself for the first time in a while that hockey isn't necessarily fun anymore. It got really serious when he was drafted and his whole career took off, and that's a reflection that he probably doesn't like to say out loud because it makes him sound ungrateful. He says as hockey got more intense, he got more intense too. And we know that because of his diet and his training regime and how hard he is with himself. Through this whole interaction though, it's very obvious that Rose sees Shane. She really asks him very pointed questions about himself that nobody else has in the series. and she's open with him back. That's reinforced again with the color choices here. They are in this very warm amber kind of glow that we already know is used a lot in moments that are meant to evoke safety and comfort. In the books, when Rose reminds Shane that she's comfortable with Michigan winters, he feels something fluttering in his stomach and asks as smoothly as he can, "Are you going to be in town for a while?" The show makes it obvious that Shane is now pursuing her with the scene that follows where they're playing poker at the table and she puts her hand on his knee. In the book, he leaves the restaurant alone, but notes that it's the easiest connection he's ever had with a woman, ever. Because she offers him an escape from Ilia. And even though, yes, he does actually like her as a person, he's more proud of the fact that he likes a girl. His brain likes that because it means, oh, then maybe I'm not gay, the thing I've been trying to avoid confronting about myself for years. In the books, Shane and Rose start dating in that moment in November, and then Ilia doesn't actually find out about it until December when he's on a road trip with his team in Detroit. Here they have them all in their training room, their gym, and they're looking at it on their phone. In the book, they're in the hotel lobby and Cliff Marlowe and Victor St. Simon are sitting at a table and call Ilia over. Ilia's immediate reaction is no, which he had hoped sound dismissive to his teammates rather than shocked. I think Connor does a wonderful job with his face here because he looks very surprised, but also sad, but also defeated. Ilia looking through the paparazzi photos, I love that they change the aspect ratio here so they're the size of an Instagram post or a news article. In the book, Ilia scowls and says probably nothing before he hands the phone back. I think this is a clever narrative device that he's focusing on Rose's face to imply jealousy. Rose told Shane that he needed to be ready for Detroit tomorrow. We find out that this game is against Detroit, so this is seemingly the next day. We also see Miles up there with her. I saw a lot of people commenting about how Shane's stretching in the scene. This is a very common hockey stretch. And Hayden, who at the beginning of the episode really wanted Shane to find a girlfriend, skates up to him, so you can kind of close that loop with him being happy about this. I love that as we continue to get posts of them and comments, you can assume that this is Ilia reading them all on his phone. And internally, Ilia has realized that this isn't nothing between Shane and Rose. He tries to say, well, it's just a kiss on the cheek. It could still be nothing. But it makes him confront the fact that he knew that the situation between him and Shane wasn't going to last forever. It was just convenient. Maybe it was over now. And he tries to say, so what? He had slept with a girl a couple days before then. So in his head, he's reeling. And when it gets too much for him, he gets off his stationary bike and he ends up stubbing his toe. In the book, he throws his water bottle at the wall and thinks to himself he'll text a girl named Haley because he liked her. She had dark hair and she has freckles. This scene is an example of why it's so important that shows and books build an emotional shorthand between two characters so that you get a big payoff at the right time. A week after Ilia is fed up watching Shane and Rose on his TV, they play against each other in Montreal. In the book, Shane gets this text after the game. In the show, it's before, which I think is more impactful because he has to then go out and play against Ilia, and he wished and expected that this text was from him. Instead, he gets a text message from Rose. In the book, we know that he feels confused and anxious, but also relieved that it's not Ilia because he wasn't sure what he wanted to say if it was, because he has a girlfriend now. And then he says, sort of. So even now, he's still not willing to admit to himself that he has a girlfriend. Rose invites him out for drinks at a nightclub later, and Shane doesn't like nightclubs, but he agrees because he's convinced that this is what boyfriends do. His teammates have already been teasing him about dating her, and he feels like this is naturally what he should be doing with her. So he's very much going through the motions here of being a boyfriend to Rose, even though it doesn't feel normal or natural to him. And that's reinforced by him going through his phone, finding his thread with Ilia and rereading their messages. Ilia, in the same scene in the book, is very much talking himself down from texting Shane. He's trying to distract himself. We can tell in this scene that he's very much avoiding Shane. He won't even look at him. And the two of them are being impacted by that because it's unnatural. Shane's aware that Ilia is avoiding him, and in a way, he's happy, but it also is surprising him that it upsets him so much. Ilia is trying to save himself from feeling any pain. If he doesn't give Shane the opportunity to hurt him further, then it protects him emotionally, but that's actually the opposite of what's happening. It's only making it worse. In the book, he is in his hotel room being purposefully bitchy towards a teammate, but I love here that they have him staring at himself in the mirror, confronting his own feelings. And Connor is so impressive in this shot. I absolutely love it. It's also important to note what the bathroom looks like in this scene. When Ilia can't take it anymore, he tells his roommate, who in this scene is Victor, that he needs to go out and go to a nightclub and find a girl. This for Ilia is now a point of pride. He's trying his hardest to fill his life with all the things that used to distract him in order to avoid thinking about Shane. The way that the nightclub scene is set up is so beautiful because we get this unbelievable soundbite of all the things she said, and we're looking at the back of Ilia's head as he walks into this club. This shot is purposeful because we're looking at the back of Ilia's head and then he turns, so we can't fully see what his facial expression is, but we can see that he's put in an environment where he has plenty of women around him to choose from. Then the camera changes so that we are almost acting as Shane's eyes in the scene approaching Rose, and then it flips and we are in Rose's point of view watching Shane approach her, and you can tell that his happiness doesn't reach his eyes here. The nightclub scene is one of my absolute favorites from this entire series, and it's done so well to convey so much with very few pieces of dialogue. Shane arrives to the nightclub and meets up with Rose, and he finds himself thinking as she's holding his hand that this should be very natural, but he just feels like everyone's staring at them and he wonders what's wrong with him. Miles is also interacting with Shane here, and in the book he is very much aware that Miles is attractive, and he's sort of just going through the motions here. He's not really contributing much to the conversation, and the whole time he's thinking to himself that he should be more excited because he's here with Rose. Any guy would be lucky to be here with Rose. In the book, this scene is also the first time Shane thinks to himself that he needs to start dressing better. The show does a good job with the Miles character of really laying it on thick here. He is not being subtle, so Shane would definitely have known he was gay when he talks to Rose in the beginning of episode 5. It's very obvious he's lying. In the book, Shane looks at all the women in the club and thinks that they're women Ilia would be interested in, and then wonders if Ilia was disappointed they didn't hook up that night. I love that in this shot of Ilia at the bar, we see him being very polite and kind to the bartender. So our first impression of him there is that he's very soft, comfortable, and then that instantly switches when he spots Miles. Through all of the shots of him scrolling on his phone looking at photos of Shane and Rose, we know that he now recognizes Miles as Rose's friend, and this shot is so genius because Ilia's face is incredible. He knows that if Miles is here, then Rose must be here, and if Rose is here, then Shane must be here. This slow pan around his face and him scanning and then spotting Shane and Rose in the crowd is brilliant. The C parts, we see them dancing together. She has her hands up his shirt, and Ilia is so angry. In the books, his first thought is fuck it, and then he goes to find a girl, and the whole purpose is to make Shane jealous. I love that he very much gets impatient waiting for his drink, but can't help but look over his shoulder here and continue to watch them. It's almost like it's so painful, but he can't look away. So to get some courage, he takes a drink and then goes to find a girl that he can make Shane jealous with. To me, this is when Ilia's face changes and softens, like how we see it in episodes 5 and 6, and it's because we're now seeing what Ilia looks like when he's hurt and doesn't have a mask on. It's the first time he's ever been jealous, and he can't hide that feeling. Then Shane here, his eyes start scanning the room and they spot Ilia's teammates. You can see him look left, look right, and then back at Rose. Now, the two creative choices that help us in this scene to kind of understand what's going through Shane and Ilia's head are the lighting cues and also the music. The first cue we get is that the lights start strobing. In the book, Shane notes he's barely even dancing, and we can see that he really does stop moving as soon as the lights start strobing in this way, and that is the moment that he spots Ilia across the room with a girl. In the book, Shane just starts moving towards him without even realizing that he was doing it. Here, I think the use of this shot is really impactful because we see him sandwiched between two people. Rose is the one who initiates this kiss, and Shane just drops his head before he realizes, I need to get out of here. I'm going to have a panic attack. In the book, he describes feeling sick and like he needed to leave. I love that in the framing of this, we are looking over Shane's shoulder from behind his ear, and we get a shot of how uncomfortable his face is walking through the crowd, but also still looking in Ilya's general direction. And then this beautiful shot where he pauses and the camera swings behind him in slow motion. So Ilia got the slow motion pan. Now we get Shane's. Ilya's we panned to the front of his face. For Shane's, we're panning to the back of his head. This spinning motion gets used a few times in the scene. This one is Shane's staircase in his home in Montreal. The narrative choice to have the camera spinning throughout this scene is meant to make us feel off balance, just like Shane feels. This is a show change because in the books, he goes home alone and actually has to pull over on the way home and cry. The insertion of this clip is meant to be a recall to the top of the episode where we saw Shane and Ilia on the same stairs kissing each other the entire way up, and it's in direct contrast to how Shane's reacting here. The last thing he wants to do is go upstairs with her. With Ilia, he was leading him up the stairs. In the book, Shane describes feeling like he suddenly wakes from a dream when he realizes that he's standing alone in the middle of the dance floor staring at Ilia, which is captured perfectly here. But in the book, he doesn't want to let Ilia notice him. We then switch point of views to Ilya's POV. He's in the middle of making out with this girl when he looks up and realizes that Shane was staring at him. I love this slow pan in because he smiles, just the tiniest little smile. You can barely see it because even though he's heartbroken, he's still happy to see him. Then we jump forward again to later on in the night when Shane and Rose are back at his house. We've seen Shane kiss Ilia, and it's not like this. In the show, Ilia does notice Shane looking at him and then tries to push the envelope further because Ilya's constantly trying to get Shane to show any sort of emotion. Now again, Shane feels like he's waking from a dream when he's watching Ilia and standing alone on the dance floor. And this is where my interpretation of the way this scene was shot might be different from some others. Ilia is clearly not in his bathroom at the hotel. That was established by the very quick shot of him looking at himself in the mirror. So to me, this is Shane envisioning or remembering him in the shower. Then the camera does this incredible slow pan in and the lighting changes. So we fade out of Shane's memory and into Ilya's actual shower. Ilia does go back to his own hotel room alone that night. And for the first time ever, he's angry about someone sleeping with someone else. So to me, this clip is actually a memory that they both have of looking at each other on the dance floor when they're back home. But the way that we flash between both of their faces at the end, it's clear that they're thinking of one another in order to find their release at the end of the night. Absolutely beautifully shot scene.